the top 50 most influential people, according to the Nonprofit Times, in the nonprofit sector. You would be a perfect guest for Profiles in Philanthropy, brought to you by Rainmakers TV, and that's why Paul Shoemaker is here. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you. That's the only list I'll make with Bill Gates.
Oh, come on now. Come on now. Top 50, that's mostly tied, though, for you to social venture partners, right?
Yes. That is definitely a recognition of me as just kind of the person running the organization, but it's a representation of the network. It's the work we've done in Seattle and playing out Paul Brainerd's vision. And it's certainly about how we've spread to 25 cities around North America and Japan. So I just think it's kind of a manifestation of all that we've built over the last 14 years, and I get to represent it.
Well, what is Social Venture Partners?
Let me describe it this way. So what if you were somebody that knew how to reduce youth violence, but you didn't have the time and all the skills needed to package it up and deliver it? And then what if you were a person that had great marketing and strategy skills, but you had not yet figured out where to apply it in a socially conscious way? For us, that's not a hypothetical. That's what we do every day. We take those folks in the nonprofit sector and those folks in the philanthropic sector, and we put them together so that they can accomplish more together than they can on their own. So we are a global network of locally engaged philanthropists. And our members are people that kick in $6K a year, but they not only contribute their financial capital, they contribute their human capital to strengthen nonprofits and to also strengthen their philanthropy.
Why do that? Why do all of the people you have, how many members now?
We have about 400 members in Seattle and about a little over 2,000 around the whole network.
Wow. So why do those 2,000 people think that it's important to strengthen nonprofits?
There is increasingly a belief, and this is part of what we're founded on, which is nonprofits can have strong programs but weak organizations. Sometimes I'll use this analogy of, like, literally my wife, she has an MSW and I have an MBA. Mm-hmm. And when I went to school, they weren't teaching me how to help junior high kids. And when she went to school, they weren't teaching her how to help build organizations. So those are the two kinds of things we're trying to put together. So there are a lot of organizations that are great at delivering programs and services, but just like a company can't just be the product, they got to be the whole organization. We try to help them build the whole organization to support that mission and those programs.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about Paul, though.
Okay.
I mean, you said you're an MBA, and I don't think of MBAs and nonprofit work in the same sentence a lot, but also you're a Microsoft exec.
Yeah. So I spent 13 years in the private sector, and I'm probably like most folks that end up in whatever their job they're in 20 years later. I certainly wouldn't have envisioned this. I loved what I did at Nestle. I loved what I did at Microsoft. I failed at a startup in between, which was a great experience. It's a learning experience when you're done. It stinks when you're in the middle of it. When I was at the point in 1998 where I was trying to look for something kind of more socially involved to do in the community, and Paul Brainerd started Social Venture Partners. I joined the organization. He got around to hiring his first staff person, and he said, "Hey, do you want to do it?" And I wasn't ready for that. But I thought about it for a few weeks, and I think the longer you go through life, what you bet on is people. And what I knew of Paul Brainerd was just the best. So I decided to take that leap. It's pretty interesting to tell your friends, well, I left Microsoft to go to work for a nonprofit. You did what, right? But what I quickly found, and what I was hoping for, was that it was, first of all, an opportunity to apply everything I learned in the last 13 years. Mm-hmm. Whether it's a nonprofit or for-profit, you're building an organization. It's an incredible bunch of human beings to work with. Our partners are people that have had some or a lot of professional success and want to now turn that into personal or social significance. So I get to work with those people to help them on that journey of personal transformation. And in the last 13 years, it just continues to grow. It continues to evolve. Being in 25 cities was not in anybody's original idea. It just happened. So this has continued to be fun and change ever since then.
Your partners that you talk about, is there a single common thread among them?
Good question. I would say that probably the strongest thread amongst those folks is the desire to be engaged not just with their financial capital, but to also bring their human, social, intellectual capital to the philanthropic equation, right? Money is always necessary. It's almost never sufficient. And these are people that want to be engaged and engage in a productive way. And so I think that's the common thread, is that they want to do more than write that check and bring those other kinds of capital.
So is that what you deal with every day? Those are the people you talk
Yeah.
with, you work with every day?
Yeah, that's what makes my job great. Our members are philanthropists, and they are people at varying stages that are along that trajectory of life of personal transformation, philanthropic involvement, and how do I realize more impact in my community, and recognizing that I can only get so far on my own, and I can get farther if I do it together with other people.
I was recently part of the Rainmakers team that went to the Clinton Global Initiative, and President Obama spoke. And he talked about how he liked being in a room with 1,500 do-gooders.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Can we call you a do-gooder?
Sure, I'll take it.
And I guess along with the do-gooder part of it, though, is that it's when we think of philanthropy, at least in the past, philanthropy was just basically writing a check.
Yep.
It's not that way anymore, is it?
No, it isn't, and I think that there's a risk in there, and there's a responsibility that's incumbent upon us when you go beyond writing the check to doing it the right way. You have to do the work we do with humility. You got to be smart. You got to learn. But if you do, I'll go back to what I just said, which is, if I write a check to someone else, that's kind of 1 + 1 = 2. If now I bring my skills, I bring my friend's skills, we create something where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Now the financial and the human capital equation for social good changes fundamentally. Now it's 1 + 1 + 1 squared, because I'm bringing so much more to the equation for a nonprofit. And then what happens is, when I get directly engaged, I get so much back from that, right? When I engage with that nonprofit organization, and we have hundreds of those stories, we go in to help someone. Who learns and who gets the most? The philanthropist does.
Huh, interesting. I go into the Social Venture Partners of Seattle website, which is svpseattle.org. We will be getting it up throughout. And I go into here as to what to do, or what we do.
Yep.
First thing I see is Connect Philanthropists.
Yep.
What does that mean?
So we are, at the core, we're a network. And to a large degree, philanthropy, as you said, has been about writing a check. It's also been a very kind of siloed world, right? Philanthropists don't interact that much. They may not get involved with the nonprofits. They also don't interact with each other that much. So by definition, we connect those people as much as we can. We connect them maybe in a grant committee to do the work to make a grant into the community. We connect them on teams to work with the nonprofits we work with. We connect them around common interests. And what happens when you get them out of their silos, if you will, they exchange ideas, they learn from each other, their individual and their collective giving gets smarter, right? It's, in a way, before everything was a network, SVP was a network, right? We've been doing that for 14 years and accelerating that. But in terms of philanthropy, we are the world's largest philanthropic network of individuals.
Wow. One of the many positives of the tech boom was that there were a lot of people who made a lot of money, particularly at Microsoft. Yeah. And what we've seen here is that so many of the former Microsoft executives and employees who did well are really giving back. Yep. They are kind of a new brand of philanthropist. Are you seeing a lot of their influence, former Microsofties, if you will, who are in philanthropy now? So
when we started, we had a whole lot of them. We've still got some of them. We have certainly tried very hard, though, as an organization, to broaden beyond that, broaden beyond the technology sector. It's a
pretty good start, though.
It is. That's a great, the key to success is start something in Seattle in 1997, right? That's a good way to start. But have they had an influence? Yes. It's interesting you mentioned that, because I really think, like 50 to 100 years from now, when people look at Bill Gates' legacy, I think his greatest legacy, honestly, will not be Microsoft, and it maybe won't even be his own foundation. Maybe it will be. I think his greatest legacy really may be the people he turned loose in the community, right? Because he allowed people to generate that wealth and have that entrepreneurial experience of building something and knowing what it means to be a part of something bigger than yourselves. And they took that mindset and that capital out into the community to make the world a better place. And I think that'll live on.
One of the other things on the Social Venture Partners website of Seattle and under what we do is strengthen nonprofits. You've talked a little bit about it.
Yeah.
How specifically, when you get up in the morning and you're excited about your day, what strengthening of nonprofits do you do during the day?
Yeah. Let me explain it two ways. So technically, we sit down with an organization and we go through their management, their leadership, their financial systems, their accounting systems, their technology, and try to assess with them how do they need to get stronger, where they need to get stronger, and then we help bring them the resources from our members to do that. Let me give you an example of that. So Ron is a partner, and he was an ex-Wall Street banker. And Jennifer is the director of the Metro Center YMCA. So Ron believes in her anti-violence programs. He could just write a check and be done with it. But as an SVP partner, what Ron said is, I can bring more than money. I can bring my financial acumen, my strategic skills. Right? So he brings that. Then he goes and gets his friends and gets his peers in the SVP network to bring their marketing skills and their communication skills and their technology skills. And now there's a whole relationship that we have with that organization to build them. What also happens is that someone like Ron, he invests himself, he vests himself in that organization's success. And in turn, the director, Jennifer, it's a more equal equation, right? So now it isn't just about Ron's capital, it's about her knowledge and the community capital she brings to the relationship. In the end, Ron will tell you he got more from it than she did. And in a sense, you just take the whole philanthropic equation and kind of turn it on its head. So who's the giver and who's the receiver now?
Wow.
And that's very cool.
I know that for nonprofit organizations, so many of them, even today, they feel like that they're always begging, and what you're describing is a completely different paradigm.
Well, I won't say we're perfect, right? But at its core, again, it's about a long-term relationship. It's about building trust. We have to believe in their mission and programs. We're not going to mess with it. We're going to try to build the organization around it. We don't always get it right. We make mistakes, right? We strike out sometimes. Sometimes we hit home runs. When we do get it right, it is really magical. You get people connected that otherwise would not connect, that learn from each other. And then what's awesome is what can happen after that, because now Ron, in my example, right, he's built his potential to do way more. And there are people that sat and watched Ron that said, wow, that's inspiring, right? And they learned from, and that's the network, and they learned from and they watched Ron. Like literally, we have a guy by the name of Tim that was one of his volunteers and said, wow, I love the way Ron did that. And I'm trying to figure out what I want to do now. And what Tim said is, I want to go help cure corneal blindness around the world. That's like a whole other story for another day. But that's the point. When you're in the network and they're connected and you do this work in this way, all of these connections happen. Sometimes they're the ones you intend to have happen. Sometimes the best ones are the ones that happen unintentionally, that you just don't expect to happen.
How do Ron and Tim find out about each other?
They're both members of SVP. Ron was doing the work. He needed a volunteer. We found Tim to go work and do the volunteer work. Actually, literally, Tim's inspiration was listening to Ron at one of our meetings talk about his work. They hadn't even met each other.
Huh. So how did you grow so fast? I mean, you said at the very beginning of the show that it was really wildly unexpected.
Yeah.
To get up to 2,000 members, and who knows where it's going next.
Right. So the growth really that was unexpected is how many cities we're in. And what happened was when we started in 1997, Paul Brainerd's vision was about Seattle, and which is great. I don't know, a year or so later, we got a call from somebody in Phoenix, we got a call from somebody in Dallas, we got a call from somebody in Vancouver, and they said, hey, that's cool what you're doing there, we'd like to do it there. And we sent them our stuff and said, have at it. We figured we'd never hear back from them again. They kept going, they kept succeeding. They were led and founded by people that are kind of like the Paul Brainards of their communities. And eventually we said, okay, we got something here. Are we going to try to get organized and do this thing together or not? And we said, let's try to do it together. We created this network called SVP International, and now there's 25 cities. And we're linked together in some ways, and in other ways, we try to leave a lot of room for local innovation too.
Let's talk about some of that local innovation
Okay.
right here in Seattle where we are. And even if you're in another city, you could probably do something like this in your city, or you may find something better to do. Who knows? SVP Seattle, Alive and Free.
Yeah.
Tell me about that program.
Yeah. So Alive and Free is actually what I referred to at the very start. It's an anti-violence program in the Seattle area. It's run through the YMCA, but its work is about taking violence and drugs and trying to turn them into a health issue as opposed to something wrong with a person. And when you do that, you recharacterize, you reframe how a person thinks about themselves, right? This is part of a health problem. I'm not flawed, it's part of a health problem. It's not letting them off the hook for it, but it reframes how they think about it. So that's the program, and its impact was unquestioned in about 2 schools with about 3 staff. And then our work, what we came in as we said, we believe in this program. They need to strengthen the organization. They need to grow the organization to grow to more scale and have more impact. So that's what we did. And over the course of 5 years, the size of the organization, I think, tripled. They got a state grant to expand it to many, many more schools. They went from 3 staff to 9 staff. And that was a home run for us, right? We really helped them grow up. But the core of it was that program and that inspiration of that really attracted us to then come in and try to build a strong organization around it.
We're going to provide a link to a great YouTube video that's actually on the SVP Seattle YouTube channel that's about the Alive and Free program, and also a link to another great program, and that's the Rainier Scholars. I personally know about this one myself, and it's an amazing program.
Yeah, fantastic. So Rainier Scholars works with kids, low-income kids, and tries to create a mentoring relationship. Starts all the way in junior high, all the way through high school. So it's a long-term mentoring relationship to eventually, ultimately, hopefully get these kids onto some kind of college experience. So in that case, again, that programmatic work was solid. They had just gotten started as an organization, so they were just almost like a startup when we went to work with them. They had to go through things like founder transition. And it's a great example of, you hear about this all the time, like say in a technology company where, the founder's brilliant, but at some point he couldn't run the place and I needed to transition to the next person that could actually lead it. Same thing's true in a nonprofit, right? So they had to go through a founder transition. They had to build a board. They had to build systems to measure their impact. They had to build out their financial systems. They had to build out their technology. We did all that work with them. And again, the benefit was certainly somewhat to them, but we have so many partners that were affected by that experience in terms of understanding community issues, in terms of understanding ultimately who the work impacts. And then what those folks also do is they take that set of experiences they had here and they can transfer it then to another nonprofit. They can transfer that to the rest of their philanthropy, right? In a way, SVP is this container. It's kind of like home base. But we want people to expand and go way beyond that with their philanthropy.
So it sounds like on the one hand, you take programs that affect individuals and then try to make them scalable for other areas, and then other areas come on. But then at the same point in time, you are an incubator.
Yep.
Wow. Something else I'm hearing is that I suspect there are probably a lot of your members are business people. Business people demand metrics. You talked a little bit about measurement. In the nonprofits that you work with, do you have some kind of metric requirement?
Yeah, with almost every group that we work with, we have a few consultants that will go in and work with them on developing a framework for how to think about measuring and then the systems to do it. One of the beautiful things about work in the private sector is there's this thing called earnings per share, right? And I know whether I failed or I succeeded, right? And so once a quarter, I know whether I'm succeeding or failing. The other 89 days of the quarter, I've got business indicators, performance indicators. A nonprofit's kind of like those 89 days without the 90th day. They don't have one number. They have a lot of things that add up to success. So the complexity with a nonprofit is you don't get one number, but that doesn't mean that you can't measure your impact. That doesn't mean you can't create the dashboard. That doesn't mean you can't paint the picture of, are we positively affecting kids' lives? Are we restoring the environment? You can measure it, you just can't measure it in one nice, neat little number.
So I guess then that to measure the Alive and Free or Rainier Scholars, it's almost anecdotal, isn't it?
Some of it's anecdotal, but some of it is also, we care about their academic achievement. That's one piece of it. We care about the attitude of the kids. We care about the behavior of the kids. Those things are, again, qualitatively to quantitatively measurable, but they are all to some degree measurable. And you, in a sense of, you don't just have one number, you have to take kind of all that data and information and paint a picture. So many business people will say, when they start into nonprofit philanthropic work, if they've been into it long enough, they will say this work is a lot harder than what they ever did in the business world. And I think they really mean that. And I think it really starts with that, which is, it's so hard to know if I was exactly specifically successful.
Well, you sure must love it, because you got into it big time, not only with Social Venture Partners in Seattle, but you were a founding executive of Social Venture Partners International.
Yeah.
Why?
I was the guy there answering the phone when they called.
Oh, there's more to it than
No,
that.
I mean, that one happened to me. So what I'll say is, I mean, seriously, there was me and myself and one staff person, and I was the one here answering the phone for a while, just kind of sending the stuff out. My role as the founding president of the network, and Paul Brainerd's the visionary that had the model. My role in that was, I think, to kind of hold the vision, and I could go out to other cities and talk about it. When we tried to figure out how to work together, I had built a lot of relationships, and I could try to help bring people together to create that core that is SVP. And today, the value that I've got is I've got the stories, right, from the last 12 years of how certain things worked in certain cities. The stories we've got here, they're 100-fold in other cities. There's other people in Minneapolis and in Pittsburgh and in Phoenix and other cities that have the same kind of stories of personal transformation that we have here. And I know those stories, and I can share those stories. So my role initially was kind of very tactical, then it was kind of strategic, and now it's almost kind of like I'm the librarian, I'm the historian that knows what went on, so I kind of like know the skeletons in the closet, and I know the stories from way back.
Some of the cities that are part of the network that are outside the United States, are there commonalities among them and Seattle or Dallas?
Yeah. The answer is yes. There's always a cultural adaptation in anything you do. But you asked me earlier, like, what's the common thread? And I gave you that answer. They want to bring more than just their financial capital. That's absolutely a common thread, whether it's Japan, Canada. We're exploring doing something in India right now, which I think will happen. I think that thread runs common to those folks. I think actually philanthropy and across the SVP network, there's a lot of things that divide us around the world and that are different. I think the notion of do-gooders, of that motivation to give back in an active, proactive way, I think that's a part of a lot of human beings' DNA. And I don't know that matters what country you're in. I think when we get together, our conference in 2 weeks, we'll all come together in Minneapolis. And when we come together, I wouldn't know if someone is from Tokyo or Calgary or Charlotte or Phoenix, other than maybe their accent, because they have that common ethos, that common desire to have an impact. And that network and those set of relationships, it doesn't matter where somebody's from.
So much of global philanthropy today is focused out of Seattle, and then so much of it is focused into Africa. Have you seen that among your members as well? So
one of our purposes is that we not only activate people to do work inside of SVP, but to do work outside of SVP. We want our folks to go on and become significant philanthropists outside of SVP. So have I seen, increasingly more people take interest in that? Yes. Not everybody, but some people do. We live in Seattle, and there's no doubt that the Gates Foundation is a role model. So seeing their impact and seeing the kind of work that they do there, I think has had an influence on people. It brings attention to it. It opens our eyes to it. It gives an awareness to it here that we might not have in some other places. So yes, I definitely see some of our members go off and become more involved in international philanthropy. And quite often for international philanthropy, it's that personal experience. I just met with somebody 2 weeks ago, and she is a full-time career building a real estate business. She has been to Africa 4 or 5 times. She just got back from her 6th trip, and she said, I can't do this anymore part-time. I got to go full-time. So she's going to switch her life. She's going to switch her career, and it was that 6th trip that did it. Right? That was her moment where she said, I've crossed over, and I got to commit my life to that.
Well, let's talk about Paul's moment. Was there a moment for you where you looked at everything that you were doing, you looked at all the successes that you had, and the one that wasn't quite as successful as what you wanted?
Yeah.
Was there one moment for you that said, this is it, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life?
I don't know if there was a moment, but I will say there was an experience, and that was when SVP started. I joined as a partner, as a member. I'm still a partner, and I was a part of the first grant committee we had, which again was our members that came together to make those grant decisions. And just being a part of that experience and meeting with those people several times over the course of several months, there was a layer to people. There was a heart to people. There was just like this whole other side of human beings that when you're so wrapped up in the business world and in a place like Microsoft or in a startup that you just don't see in a person. You just don't see that side of them. And here were all these people that I understood kind of in one context in life, and now there was just this whole other side of them that I saw. And it was just so enriching and so inspiring for me. So then when Paul Brainerd said, hey, I want to hire somebody, do you think you want this job, which I wasn't ready for? What really convinced me to do it was Paul and those people I'd worked with in that committee. They gave me that experience, and that's what gives me the best job in Seattle to this day.
And that job actually is called Executive Connector?
You bet.
What is that?
So, as you know, most nonprofits, the main person is called the executive director. In our organization, first of all, our partners, our members, they drive a lot of the work. They make the grant decisions, they do the strategic volunteer work, they participate in the community collaborations. So as a director, I don't direct a whole lot of stuff, right? They do a lot of the work. The other part of that is that a key part of my job is to connect those people. When we put the right 2 people together, that's when 1 + 1 = 17, right? And these are folks that really can have a significant impact on the world, whether it's their community or their neighborhood or their whole world. So one of the most important things that I do in my job and my staff does in our jobs is to connect people, to listen for connections. Maybe you'll have a conversation with one person in 2 weeks, you hear a conversation with another person, and you're like, those 2 people have to meet. And they meet, and then something takes off. So a lot of what I do is connecting. So that term fits me better than directing.
Well, with that's going to be the end of the show. Is there a more perfect profile in philanthropy than Paul Shoemaker? Well, maybe not. We'll see you next time right here on Rainmakers TV's Profiles in Philanthropy.